Hello friends, welcome back to a new update. Today I will try to keep this video much shorter than the last two. I'm still unsure what the next bigger topic should be, so until that is decided, let's do some code cleaning. There's a lot of code and methods that can be moved and placed better for more cleaner looking code. So that is what we're gonna do today. And as a reminder, all of the code and assets can be found on my website or on GitHub. If you have questions about this tutorial, or maybe you get stuck somewhere, check out the Discord link. And if you want to go the extra mile to show your support, there is a link below where you can buy me a coffee. Even though I don't drink coffee, I'm a tea guy. In the last episode, we added the most requested topic, multiple levels. But before we started with that, we took care of a couple of bugs and some much needed fixes. After they were solved, which didn't take too long, we made the level completed overlay class. It was this overlay that was going to be shown each time we completed a level. It's not much to show, but we just need the functionality of it. To make our game run with more than just one level, we had to change up a bit how we load the levels. Now we take the images from the folder and create a level from each image. With some simple sorting method, we made sure that our levels will be in order. After we got the levels working, we added the last part, which was a spawn point for the player, by using the green color. As long as our level images follows the rules, we can have as many levels as we want. Keep the height of the level to 14, keep the minimum width of the level to 26. The name of the level should be a number that follows the level before it. Make sure there's a player spawn in the level, and that there is always one enemy, otherwise the level will be completed as soon as we started. That is pretty much how we went from one level to as many as we want. Alright, let's begin. We start in the enemy class, I think. We're gonna move gravity to the constant class. So let's split our view here. Like this. Because we got gravity both in the enemy class as well in the player class. So let's just take this gravity, remove it, and place it in... let's keep it at top here. So public, static, final, float, gravity, but we're gonna have it like gravity, like so. And then in our enemy class, where is the error? There is error. We're gonna change it to gravity. And we are also going to import it. Import static utils dot constants dot gravity. And now that works. Let's go to the player class and do the same. Where is gravity? Here's gravity. Remove that. We got some error. Let's change that to the gravity in the constant class. And we also need to import it here as well. Gravity. So instead of having it in two classes, we now have gravity in just one, which is the constant class. And that's going to be a pretty common theme in this episode. Things we have both in the enemy and the player, etc. We remove it from those classes and move it to the constant class or the entity. So let's move on to the next one, which is animation speed. It's 25 in player, and I think it's in Krabby maybe? No, enemy. We have animation speed of 25 here as well. So let's just move it to the constant class. So public, static, final, int, AniSpeed equals 25. And then we remove that. We're gonna move animation tick as well, but not to constant class. And then update animation tick, animation speed. Let's grab all actually, instead of just the gravity. Like so. Then to player, remove animation speed there as well. And let's change the import gravity. We grab them all. Go to our error. Animation speed. Yeah, perfect. So at the top here for our player class, we're gonna remove animation tick and animation index and move them to entity. So it will be not private, but it will be protected int AnimationTick AnimationIndex. So we don't need to change anything in here, but for our enemy, where do we have it? We have it right there, and AnimationIndex. We might need to change this one. No, we do not. We just need to remove it, because now it exists in entity instead of enemy and the player. Then we can take a look at the EnemyState, and let's remove EnemyState from the enemy class, and let's create a protected int state instead in the entity class, because then we can remove PlayerAction as well. So PlayerAction and state will now be the same. So for our player, we might need to set this.state is equal to idle. And we have some more errors, because when we draw it, we call PlayerAction, but now we call state. Get by the mount state, start animation, changing all of this to state, like that, and then we have an error here. And that should be all the errors for the player. We just changed PlayerAction to state. And then the player, we do the same. So state equals EnemyState, yeah. Same there, switch there, like so. But at the bottom of our enemy class, we have a getter. Let's actually remove that getter. Go to our entity class and paste it in here. But it's not EnemyState, it's state. So if we for some reason need to get the state in the player, we don't have to create a getter in the player. We can just use the one in entity instead. But we do have some more errors. We have one in Krabby, and that's because we switch EnemyState when we should switch state in our update behavior. Let's take a quick look and see if our game runs, and it does. So we've done a few changes, and we're just making sure that the game still runs, and it does. Perfect. Now we can head back to our player class and go up here. We still have booleans for up and down, even though we never use it. So let's just remove those and see what happens. We got a few errors, but I think those errors we can just remove. These getters and setters are completely useless, so we can remove them. And I think that's all we need to do for up and down. Now we're gonna change up AirSpeed, and also I think the enemy got something called FallSpeed. Yeah, so we can remove FallSpeed from our enemy and AirSpeed from our player. And then we head over to entity, where we create a protected float AirSpeed, and by calling it AirSpeed we need to go to our enemy class and change it to AirSpeed instead of FallSpeed. I think that's all. We have one more actually, because they do the same, so why not just keep it in entity class instead. And while we're working on AirSpeed, we might as well remove InAir from the player and move it to our entity class. And not private, it should be protected. And InAir we can set to false right away. And InAir works, but enemy, we can go up here. We should have one here as well. Yeah, InAir, we remove it as well. Like so. And then we can go to player and look for max health and current health and move those to our entity class. So here we can add them. Private or protected. And we're not gonna set either max health or current health. We're gonna do that in our player class, where we have our constructor. We say this dot max health is equal to 100. This dot current health equals max health. And to our enemy class, do we have max health? We set it already, but we can remove those right there. And it's still going to work. Perfect. And let's make another quick check just to see if everything is working. So we didn't make any errors. Yeah, it looks. And we should have a little bit more health now, yeah. Perfect. I think it was in the last part of our enemy class or enemy episode where we added our attack box. And we have one in the player as well as one in Krabby actually. And we're just gonna remove it. And just the variable AttackBox from both the player and the Krabby, and we're gonna add them in here. So protected rectangle 2D dot float AttackBox, like so. And the player, wherever we create the AttackBox, InitHitbox, yeah, that looks alright. And the Krabby, just need a refresh and it's looking good again. Perfect. Then we can head back to our player class and look for PlayerSpeed right here. And just remove that, go to our entity and add it here. But it will not be a private, it will be a protected, and it will not be called PlayerSpeed, it will be called WalkSpeed, because the enemy will use it as well. So in player, we're gonna say this dot WalkSpeed is equal to game.scale times 1.0 float. And take this WalkSpeed and change PlayerSpeed and PlayerSpeed. Then over to our enemy and say WalkSpeed is equal to game.scale times 0.35. 35, like so. And we need to set it a float so it's not a double, and then it should work. Yeah, enemy is still running like it should. Perfect, as well as the player, of course. As we move the attack box into entity class, we can now take a look at our InitHitbox. And every time we call this method, whether or not it's in our player class or, for example, in our Krabby class or any other enemy that we might have, we're always passing in X and Y, and that will never change. That will always be X and Y. So we might as well go to our entity class, remove X and Y from the call, because it will never be different from the X and Y we pass in at constructor. So X and Y will then be grabbed from our public global instead of these parameters. So if we save this, we should have 2 errors. Yeah. And we can then remove X and Y from the player, and from the enemy, we remove X and Y. And also something funny is that we have one InitHitbox in our enemy class and one in our Krabby class. So in our enemy class, we're actually going to remove it because we have 2 calls for the same thing. So one of them overrules the other one, which is completely pointless of having 2. So we're just going to keep one, and that's going to be in our Krabby class. So in our Krabby class, we remove X and Y as well. But every time we call this method, we also pass in 2 values that are unique for each enemy or the player, which is in this case 22 by 19, and for the player it's 20 by 27. But we always scale it, and we don't need to scale it here. We can move it to our InitHitbox. So we ask for width and height, and then we go times game.scale, but we cast it over to integers here. And then we do one for height as well. This is gonna look a little bit cleaner, game.scale. And then we can't forget to remove it from our player and our enemy, or a Krabby. Otherwise it's gonna be quite a large sprite. So it looks a lot cleaner now. Instead of X, Y, game scale, it's just 20 and 27. And in our Krabby, we're gonna remove the times game scale as well. Like so. And that looks much cleaner, in my opinion. And just to make sure it still runs and looks the same. And it does. Perfect. And we can also draw our attack box. And that method is in our player as well as one inside our Krabby. So we're going to remove them from these two classes and have it in our entity class instead. And we're going to change it to protected. So we have the normal hitbox if we want to draw it. And now we have the attack box if we want to draw it. So in the player, we remove the private one like so. And we remove it from the Krabby, that's correct. And now, if we want to draw it, it's going to be in our entity class. And the last fix we're going to do today is in our enemy class. At the bottom, we have something called GetAniIndex, but the animation index is not in the enemy class, it's in our entity class. So we just add that getter at the bottom. So now if we want to get the animation index, when we're drawing the enemy, we're calling it in the entity class. And that also allows us to ask for it from the player. So yeah, that looks good. Let's give it a try and see if our game runs as it did before we started messing around with the code. And it looks like it. The level moves, perfect. And the player can kill the enemy and we can move to the next level. Perfect, sweet. Now our code is cleaner and ready for the next episode. It's quite easy to get stuck in tunnel vision when coding. So doing a review of your code once in a while is not only to make your code easier to read and add things to, but it also makes it much easier to debug whenever you have a bug. If you guys have any good ideas what the next update should be about, let me know in the comments below. Until then, take care now and have a wonderful day. Bye.